Success isn't a map you can follow. It starts with a spark of curiosity for the unknown, dedication for the unlearned, and innovation to pave the way for the next generation of leaders. These are the makings of our entrepreneurs who are redefining this industry by bringing the real in real estate. Real people, real experiences, real excellence. Welcome to the Real Relentless Podcast by Century 21 Tri-Cities, a real estate brokerage in Eastern Washington. On this episode, we sit down with Justin Coronado, co-owner of UpAngle Drone Services, and cover how he got into piloting drones and what he expects to see from this ever-changing industry, especially when it comes to real estate.
I'm Justin Coronado. I'm one of the owners of UpAngle Drone Services located here in Tri-Cities, Washington.
How long have you partnered with Century 21?
So we've been doing media, support for Century 21 for probably around 5 years. It was kind of like one of our first big clients in the region, and we were super excited to kind of get away from, back in the day when we first started the company, we were doing agent to agent and brokerage with brokerage. And so it kind of became one of those things where we were always having to negotiate with different people and different clients on what their wants and needs were, price points, things like that, because everything was different. And then we met Vicky through the Chamber of Commerce, and it really became a kind of like a really good, strong client potential as far as like building and streamlining processes in the real estate game. And so when Vicky and I were talking one day and wanting to, kind of venture down looking at exclusivity, working together, it was really exciting because we were able to kind of build that relationship and get it going from that standpoint.
Have you worked in the real estate field before?
Yeah, so real estate was kind of we're a drone company, and so primarily using drones in our media, we really saw real estate as kind of like the entry level way to get into the business. Real estate was really kind of just getting going with drones, and whether it was using the drones to get aerial photos or video kind of was popping off at the same time. And we really wanted to just kind of establish that presence in the Tri-Cities. There wasn't a lot of people doing it with drones at that time. And so I think it was kind of a natural fit as far as looking at real estate for one of our potential markets. And early on, it was kind of one of our bread and butter segments of the business because it was highly sought after, and there wasn't a lot of tech or people that knew how to use the drones to go do that kind of work. And so we kind of filled that gap, and then it just built into more of a solidified relationship with Century 21 and kind of just hit the ground running from there.
So I have to ask, did your Air Force background influence you?
So people, when I talk about my previous military experience, a lot of people always ask that question, oh, were you a drone pilot or those kind of things? And it's funny because I never was a pilot. And a lot of people always just think Air Force and they think planes and all that stuff. And we're all not the Top Gun, pilots. And so I was actually a logistics guy myself. And so the cool part about that, though, as far as how it relates to drones, is I was actually able to see a lot of the drones that the military's different branches they use. And so, but I was more responsible for shipping them, inspecting how that process would go from when they would go from one country to another. And so I was exposed to a lot of what the military had. And then it wasn't until years later after I was out of the service and I met my partner, Brian, and he was the founder of our company and really was kind of building his own drones at the time, and it was more of a hobby, but he definitely was already working towards a business plan and kind of trying to project where you could make money with more of the consumer level drones. And so that's kind of how I got tied to it and had the interest with him to kind of move forward with the business.
The drones that you used, you built those?
That's how we started. Yeah, and so a lot of people, I would say the general public probably didn't know what drones were till more around 2015, I would say, is kind of the year they became like the household name, where you started seeing them at stores. Some of the companies became global as far as reputation, and there's almost like an Apple style of company that really took over the consumer market for drones. And most people know them. DJI is really the company that is surrounded with all types of cameras and gimbal systems and mainly their drones are what they were known for. And so prior to that, it was really people just exploring with new models and people trying to develop products that were going to be able to be used in fields like making movies for Hollywood or all different types of services that you're seeing today. But we started kind of when a lot of these companies were really just kicking off.
How did you develop your video background?
Videos for us was kind of just the natural way, I think, of getting into the business. Because back then, and when we started, 2012, 2013 timeframe, like I said, a lot of people didn't know what drones were, unless you were talking about warfare drones, the military drones we were just talking about. Consumer level drones were really just an unknown thing. And so the first couple of years of us growing the business was really just about educating companies. I think we did a lot of education as far as answering questions, doing presentations for companies. We often would, I remember back in the day when we would just walk into a boardroom when they had interest, as far as what can you do with the drone to help our company with whatever that reason was. And we would just set down one of our huge drones on the boardroom table. In the boardroom, all the members would just be oohing and awing because they'd never seen anything like that at that point in time. And so a lot of it was just the education piece on kind of exploring what companies could do with them at that time.
Since you've started, how has working with drones changed?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot. I mean, all the things have changed and they're constantly changing in the drone world. It's probably one of the fastest growing tech markets that there is. There's a lot of software changes that are happening over the years. The platforms themselves, DJI has become, a world-renowned giant company as far as consumer-level drones. There's several companies that are trying to catch up to DJI, and so they have a lot more competition now. But the major changes for us were really, just trying to stay with the speed of the technology. One of the biggest challenges for us is kind of like the cell phone market is the best way I can describe that. Or if you think of TVs or some other main, technology products over the last 10, 15 years, when you think about those type of things, really every year there's an improvement that comes out. And so when you think about it from a company standpoint, investing in your equipment, most companies don't have to rebuy new equipment every single year. It becomes really challenging for companies like us that are trying to stay as modern and up to date as possible, but it's financially very difficult to do that because they're not cheap pieces of equipment. So one of the things that we always do is just try to research the different things that are out there for the equipment and make sure that they aren't that year after year kind of turnover. Just making sure that they can be sustainable for multiple years. And we've been fortunate enough to really just make some, whether there were smart decisions or lucky decisions, we've kind of had that nice streak of not having to worry about the equipment side because all of our stuff that we use is cross-utilized across all the markets we serve. So it's not just for video. We do a lot of mapping with our stuff. We've done inspections. We can serve a lot of different industries with the equipment that we have without having to buy a specific piece of equipment for one specific job. Smart, but it's probably more luck than anything because that's not the typical process, I think, for most drone services companies. That might have been one of the reasons that a lot of those companies failed was just not being able to keep up with that demand and the equipment. And it was just a luck of the draw, I think, on choosing your equipment to use.
Are you able to sell pieces of your equipment so you can reinvest in other equipment?
There is like a used market, but because that turnover is so rapid, the prices of your equipment really depreciate over time. And so it really depends on what you're trying to sell and what the purpose of that equipment would be used as far as how bad they've depreciated over that time period. But there's pretty significant depreciation, just like with any type of technology product right now. And you think about trying to sell an iPhone that's from 2 years ago, even versus the cost of what a brand new one costs now, you're still not getting that much money back from what you originally purchased it for. And this goes the same for most of our equipment. Most people want the newest, greatest, hottest thing that's out there so that they can make that last, as long as possible before they have to upgrade their equipment again. But there is a resale value. We have some stuff that's got unique capabilities and services, and so those things, you can always upgrade and still find users that are looking to get into that market on maybe more of an entry level, or they want to test it out without having to pay that top dollar price. And we've sold some systems over the years, stuff that we found that we didn't use as much as we needed, or we would upgrade another system or a camera and they would become obsolete in our eyes, but there's still a lot of people that could still use those things. And so it just depends on what you're trying to look at for those equipment decisions we were talking about before. I mean, there's a lot of people that are trying to learn what drones are capable of and are still trying to basically test out that market. And so those kind of entry level systems are really, really popular still. It's more difficult when you're talking about the top dollar commercial level, industrial level kind of systems, where those, once they turn over, the technology advancement on the newest model is pretty significant. So I always use cell phones and TVs because if you think about the changes that are happening now, there's not huge changes typically from year to year, but if you broke that into maybe a 3 to 5 year analysis, there's significant changes between the cameras and the speeds of those devices, and it goes the same with the drones.
There's videos of drone fails, like a guy swimming out to catch his drone right before it hits the water. Have you ever had one of those moments?
We've been lucky, I think, and we've had one drone that crashed, and it wasn't even a pilot error; it was more a mechanical error. Due to a sensor, it decided that it was next to an object and pushed itself the other direction and hit a pole, and it dropped in an open area. And so I wouldn't say that we've had that perfect record, but we've been almost perfect. And the biggest thing that we get from people, I think, a lot of the time is that's one of the main questions we always get asked: how many times have you guys crashed? And there's a lot of pilots out there that have learned the hard way on trying to fly these things and use them on different jobs and things like that. And I think that's one of the reasons that UpAngle became a trusted brand and allowed us to kind of grow our relationship with some of the more successful companies in the market. And it really comes down to that track record. So understanding your equipment and following the regulations that are out there by the FAA, those have always been kind of like top on our procedures for how we operate, because we knew that was going to be a problem for the general public, and it still is today, where you see those funny YouTube videos, or you see and hear about stories of your neighbor crashing a drone or whatever it is, right? We hear that all the time, and people usually are joking about it, but we've never really taken it to that level, because we understand how important it is to not ever crash, to not ever have an incident. As an actual business that operates with that equipment professionally, we can't afford to have that happen. And so it's not a hobby for us. It's really just like any other job. And if you think about any other profession, where if you were crashing your equipment on a regular basis, most companies wouldn't be good at that. And so neither are we. And we do everything we can to make sure we operate safe and follow the regulations. And I think our reputation, proves that. And we've seen... we've been around events and things like that where they've had lost drones, they've had issues, and fortunately it has nothing to do with us, but seeing that happen shows you how much room there is for improvement. And the industry and the FAA, that's a huge challenge for them. The regulation piece, trying to tie it to everyday users, and integrate these fun capable pieces of equipment that are going to be used in a lot of different industries as we move through the years. That's a huge challenge for anybody that's looking at that. And so we often used to get frustrated with the FAA because the regulations were moving too slow, it seemed like, or they would make rules that just didn't make sense to us, knowing, the business side of it. And so trying to work hand in hand with those type of entities has been important over the years. And we've actually been in part of talks and communications with companies and government entities, and looking from our perspective as the service provider, what are good, what are things that are good with what's going on, what are things that are bad, how can we improve? And it's always just trying to drive that forward to where, eventually they will be everywhere. And there's a lot of people that think that that's kind of like that sci-fi kind of mentality, but I think people are always amazed when I tell them about things that we watch closely in the industry with. Most people have heard about the delivery platforms that are going to be happening soon. And there's a lot of stuff like that that's coming out that people are just not aware of quite yet. But there's millions and millions of dollars going into research and development and testing and it's a big deal. There's a lot of things that are going to be happening, but it all goes back to that regulation and safety piece on how you can do it properly.
Have you seen people get in trouble for not being as cautious?
Yeah, it used to get me upset. Like as an early part of our business, I remember Brian and I used to get really frustrated when we would see maybe an opportunity slip past us for whatever reason, and we would see a company that we had approached or already been in conversations with end up using a different alternative method to fulfill their drone needs. And often it came down to, I think it's cost for one. People are always looking for the best deal possible. And what I always tell people is you buy what you get kind of thing, like, and you pay for what you get. And when people have those negative experiences, we learned over the years that actually that was a good thing for us as a company, because whether we missed that early opportunity and they used somebody else, more often than not, they would come back to UpAngle because they weren't able to achieve what they wanted or they had something happen. And so actually that's what led us to really branch out into some of the other industries that we were doing. We were looking for opportunities where clients were having negative experiences, and then we would try to capitalize on where they went wrong. And that's kind of how we grew some of our business segments, was just doing what we do. And we spent years, I think, in the beginning. That was the interesting part for us, was that we didn't just go buy the technology that's on the market right now and rush to the market as far as trying to offer services and do all these things. I think our first 3 years, we really spent a lot of time on developing everything. There wasn't really a market. And I mean, I think that's what people forget, is that like, there was no drone services company, and there's still people don't know what a drone services company really is unless you're kind of looking for that service. It's a growing market. It's something that we had to come up with price points and figure out, what type of services are we going to offer, because there's a million things that you could do with drones, and really had to do a lot of like time study and analysis on those different industries to understand like where do we want to go with the business. And a lot of people rushed to market, and that's where you saw the failures happen, whether it was on the piloting side and crashing their equipment, or just not being able to deliver the quality that the client was looking for. Or they would have trouble on the back end and wouldn't have the skills to, say we were doing video work or things like that. They wouldn't be able to have the quality that the customer was looking for, or mapping and some more of the data-driven type of services that drones are doing. They wouldn't have the know-how to do some of the things that the clients were wanting. And so we always make sure when we go into an opportunity with a client that we understand what they want. We're very clear on how we're going to be able to do it, what's possible, what's not possible. And that's really, I think, helped us as far as establishing those trusted relationships, is that we're very honest and knowledgeable about what we can do.
Do you see a lot of people using drones improperly or without a license?
We have, yeah, it's been funny. I remember early on in the earlier years, the regional FAA office and things like that would reach out to us every once in a while. They'd see the video on Facebook, or they'd see something online where people were, questioning what was going on. They'd ask us if we knew anything about it, because at that time we were the only company really that was doing anything with drones on a wide scale basis. And a lot of the times we didn't know what was going on. We'd often see these same videos and be just as concerned as most people would be, whether they're flying over people or doing something unsafe. And then, like you mentioned earlier, where you were talking about, YouTubers and things like that, they were often doing a lot of things that were technically illegal according to the regulations. And so that was a big deal. And it still is. And we called it earlier on. I remember Brian and I, we referred to that time as like the Wild West, where it was really just, there was rules and regulations, but who was following them, who was actually enforcing them. And so we were kind of on that, difficult side of where we had to make sure we were still following everything and doing everything correctly, regardless of what we were seeing out there. And so it was frustrating sometimes to see that stuff where, it's like they got a cool shot or they're able to do something, but knowing the back end on the safety and the regulation side, knowing that they weren't supposed to do things like that. We often had to just kind of like bite our tongue on stuff like that. But overall, I think it helped us build those relationships that we've continued to talk about, as far as just knowing that we're always going to be doing the right thing. And whether a client wants to do something or not, there's rules and regulations out there for a reason, and you've got to be able to follow them and understand them.
So if someone says, hey, my buddy has a drone and is going to film this for me, what would you say?
I would say good luck. Make sure you know that they know how to operate the equipment. I always tell people, because the biggest thing that most people don't realize when they're hiring drone services is the most basic question is that any business or entity should be asking is, are they licensed and are they insured? Because if they're not, that liability could come back to you as the client. And we've seen cases like that happen where FAA does a full investigation if there's something that goes wrong. And so we don't worry about it as much anymore because we kind of just worry about ourselves. There's too much of the negative stuff that happens out there, I think, on a regular basis that we just get kind of overwhelmed trying to help people work through those things. But we always tell people, make sure your pilots are insured, make sure they're actually licensed and current with their licensing, and make sure that they can deliver what they're telling you they can do. I would tell most businesses that vet your companies that you're using for the drone work. Do your due diligence, because most people don't think if something happens, who does that fall back on? And the way that those rigs are actually written, the business that's working with that pilot could actually be held liable to a certain extent as well. And so make sure you do your due diligence and know who you're working with. I mean, that's kind of the most just generic things that you would think of, but I think part of that is that Wild West mentality that happened, and people don't think that anything negative ever happens. But we see different channels where it shows that kind of stuff being reported, and like those YouTube videos and things like that. Like, you can go through the FAA's actual investigations and what their court cases ended up being, and some of them are ridiculous. As far as we don't see a lot of jail time. What we see typically is the punishments right now are huge financial penalties. And so depending on what was being done and the level of severity, it could be anywhere from a few $1,000s to millions of dollars. And that could just be for something. I think one that jumps out at me was there was a YouTuber in New York that was doing a lot of videos, just streaming, and a lot of his stuff just dealt with inner city New York, which when you think of that environment, you've got millions of people on the streets, you've got cars everywhere, you've got the skyscrapers. And so they got in trouble for a video that had millions of views. It was an amazing video. Don't get me wrong. The video was cool to watch, but the amount of regulations that they broke in order to capture that video cost them millions of dollars in fines. And that was actually for a real estate company, I believe. So believe it or not, it's kind of one of those things that you just don't think about. You think people are seeing that end product and are willing to do kind of whatever it takes sometimes, but you always want to do your due diligence on making sure that your missions are safe, that they're legal, and that your pilots are, licensed and insured, like I said. And if you go down that path, you should be okay. And there's a lot of ways that you can communicate what are potential issues, and you should be communicating with your pilots regardless on what could go wrong. What is the worst thing that could go wrong is something that we always ask ourselves before we do our flights. And we always make sure that we come up with ways to mitigate that.
What do you enjoy about providing drone services to a real estate agency?
My most favorite thing, I think, when we started working with Century 21 and building that out over the years with Vicky, because it's kind of evolved on how much we were doing and what services we were offering. And Vicky's always got new ideas, and she's very innovative on the marketing side of things. And Century just, top notch with what they do. I think as far as their brand reputation and everything is always moving forward. What's next? It's not, you don't really see Century coming in behind another idea and kind of jumping into the marketing game in that aspect. It seems like they've always, since we've worked with them, always are looking to what's the newest and greatest way that they can improve their brand. And so with us, our favorite thing was just getting that consistency down. When we were able to go exclusive with Vicky and her team, it was kind of just a game changer for us. And I think she enjoyed it as well, because it just ends up being more, you know what you're going to get, and you're able to actually grow and build that relationship out over time on how do you stay in front? How do you constantly streamline and improve and become more efficient? So instead of doing a few homes a month, now we're constantly doing some of the featured builder homes for Century. We help out with some of their events. We help out you with all the different things that are going into the marketing overall there's always somewhere we can fit in, it seems like, and help out with that. And so that's been my most favorite thing, is just constantly changing with the company, helping Vicky and anything that her team needs. And we've been able to do individual agents, help them with their listing, whether it's photos or aerial photos or their videos that they need to help them on their marketing side, or to help more the whole team approach from Century, and really just try to deliver quality and our expertise as far as the drone world, and provide them the best aerial that we think is that we can do around here. So that's been my most favorite thing, is just kind of building that relationship out with Century.
What was one of the most fun projects you've worked on?
Yeah, so I think what I enjoy, and I think what Brian would probably say if he was here too right now, one of our highlights of the year, I think, for us, is doing Parade of Homes for Century, which just happened. But being able to see some of those, top homes in the market at that time, the ones that the builders are putting all their resources in to really show off. For us, it's awesome to be able to work and build that media out, because they're perfect homes. I mean, they're what the builder wants to advertise. They want to have that, reflect their brands and their quality and all the new things that are being able to be done in the new homes. And so for us to go in, and whether it's the home tour that we do for Century 21, or interviewing those builders and just getting insights to what their mindsets are and who those featured builders are with Century, it's really unique process from, I guess, that marketing side, because sometimes you're there and you're just capturing the story, but when you've worked with somebody like Vicky and her team, and you guys just overall, you really get to know the people. And so to capture those stories, it's really kind of an enjoyable thing from a video perspective on helping them highlight what they're trying to show off. And so for us, that's one of the best highlights, I think, that we get to do year after year with you guys.
Get some home interior ideas.
Yeah. Seriously, I'm always like, dang. When we walk around the house, we're just like so candid with our conversation. We're filming. I'm like, you gotta check out this bathroom.
Yeah.
It's
edit the sound out later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's how we are when we go do, like, especially Prodigy. I mean, Prodigy's, you never know when we walk in a Prodigy home. I mean, we've done so many Prodigy homes because they do every single one when they're complete, and to see the evolution of their floor plans to where they're at now versus like even when we first started with those guys is really amazing, because you can always tell it's a Prodigy house, right? I mean, you can tell when it's Prodigy. Like, we're going through these developments where there's hundreds of homes pre-existing. They might have several homes that are being built at one time, and yeah, they usually have the builder signs up, but you don't have to look for that builder sign. You can literally drive down the streets and be like, that's polished, that's and having that recognition is kind of a weird thing, but most people don't do that. But when you go into that, you never know when you see that Prodigy house from the outside. Like, when you walk in, sometimes it's just like the really nice house, and everything's just really nice, and sometimes you walk in and it's like, whoa, like, dang, is this a parade home? You just never know what you're going to get with some of those homes. And so I think that's why when we do Parade, it's like, I can't wait to see what they're putting in. And we don't have to ever actually do the Parade homes, because we're always walking around and seeing them, at least the ones that you want to see for top quality and stuff. So I love Prodigy homes. Like, the last one we just did was a floor plan like they had tweaked for the client, and I know that that's what they do a lot too, is they have their regular stuff, and then they will customize to whatever that client wants. And just like the little changes that you get to see with what they can do, it's like, oh, I don't know how many times I've said I want this house, like, this is my house kind of thing with Prodigy.
Is drone racing something that you're interested in?
So drone racing is it's more well known now than probably ever has been. It's been one of those growing sports where even ESPN and some big names have really kind of taken it on, and you'll see it on every once in a while on TV. And so people have really started to learn about drone racing more than just kind of that smaller community that it used to be. And it's really kind of a growing sport. It's a unique sport, and so it's still something that's kind of in the works, and I'm sure will become more and more popular over the years. And for us, it was a matter of time. So those guys that are doing the drone racing, they're just like any other athlete. They're training every day. And so for us, we can't play with the drones, it seems like, because we're not that good anyways. I'm terrible. I wouldn't be able to do it at all. Brian, on the other hand, he was into racing for a while, and practiced, and was really good at freestyling, things like that. But what he learned quickly, I think at his first race, which we went to Bend, Oregon, years ago, I remember it was one of the first races they did in the Northwest, and some of those guys you see on TV were there. And so we were all excited that Brian was going to be able to compete and do this. And when we saw him lose to like a 12-year-old, I think it was the defining moment in Brian's career where it was just like, he's done. He's not going to pursue that anymore, and it turned more into a hobby for him. And so the drone racing is just way different than what we do. We're not flying through loops and going 100 miles an hour with our equipment, and it's a unique sport to watch. So
I saw a video of a drone competition in Dubai and how insane it was.
That was like one of the biggest ones they've done so far. Yeah, and that was kind of just, it shows you where that market's going, is all the money that was invested into that race. If you saw that racetrack they set up for it, it was amazing. They really wanted to highlight it. Being in Dubai, very, unique area, and they put all the resources they could in there. The prize money, like you said, was huge, because up to that point, prize money was nowhere near, $1 million. And now you're seeing that become where, people used to joke about professional video gamers, but people don't joke about it anymore when they learn how much money that those often kids are actually earning. And so when you have multi-million-dollar revenue potential on those things, not to mention all the branding and advertising that can get tied to those type of contracts with them, the top cream of the market really can come off pretty well. But that's what we always think of, is when you think of like the odds of a professional athlete, it's no different for the video game world or for the drone racing world. So we always tell people, just be realistic with your expectations, but it's something that people are growing into and learning how to do. I know even West Richland out here, I think their amateur course out here offers a lot of hobbyists that go out there to go fly, and they compete against each other in more of the local races and things like that. And that's kind of how you can get your feet wet and just jump into that market and see what you can do. And some people will continue with it, and others will just have it as a hobby.
I've heard talks about indoor drone racing here.
At one point, Brian and I were considering a business model for that. Yeah, it was just something we never pursued, but I would see Tri-Cities as an area you could do something like that. One of the things is space, though. So with the lack of commercial real estate available in Tri-Cities, it'd be tough for somebody to try to find a suitable area, was one thing that we were concerned about. But as far as the market, Tri-Cities is a great location just to be able to tie, multiple communities together. And there is interest, whether it's the small, clubs here. But when you think about all the major cities and just the Northwest in general, there's a lot of people that are interested in, especially in the drone racing side of things, to where it would be a great place to host things. They get the huge crowds for water follies and some of these other kind of multi-regional attractions. And a drone racing type of setup could be something out there that maybe some entrepreneur will chase after in the future. But yeah, I think it would be a good location to have something like that here.
Have you seen the video of that racing drone going through the bowling alley?
And that's one pilot. So that pilot started. He's an FPV pilot, which means he flies with the goggles. He's very capable of the drone racing style of piloting mini quadcopters. And so that all started when he did one, they call that a single shot type of video. And that means that there's no cutting, there's no editing what you're seeing. It's literally the pathway. The camera starts in the beginning of the drone, or the beginning of the video with that drone, and flies through the bowling alley, if that's one you want to talk about. And it's amazing, right? I mean, you see him go through the front doors. He's going around the food area, the waiting area. He goes down the lane. He goes through the bowling pins. He's in the back where most people have never even seen what that looks like, behind the bowling pins. And then he's flying back out all the way through. And that's all one shot. He did another one where it was actually in, I think one of the first big ones was, I believe it was Foot Locker, if I remember right. or maybe it was one of those athletic type of stores, but basically it was like a customer's perspective of walking into like a Foot Action or a Foot Locker, and everyone kind of knows what those are. Going into that store and having that environment of going around, looking at the shoes. He's flying around people where the customers are being assisted, getting their shoes tried on, and really just kind of flying around the merchandise, but they do it in such a unique way that it was just kind of a new trendy thing. And now he's really established a new market of commercials, because those are great for, that 30 to 60 second type of video. Gives you perspective that nobody else can do. You can't do that with anything else without, special effects and things like that. And so really that talent is amazing. And that's something that we would love to be able to do, but it goes back to like the drone racing thing, goes back to the talent of what's there. And there's not many people in the world, I would tell you, that can have that type of pilot capability. And so it's really something that's unique with not only them being able to pilot the equipment like that, but having the creativity on understanding where that camera should flow through a scenario and come up with helping, these giant companies come up with unique commercials.
Well, he's not racing against 15-year-olds.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think he's doing quite well. Yeah, because there's not a lot of people that can just pilot like that, and a lot of the stuff they're doing now, what he was using in those were drones that are about the size of your hand or a little bit smaller. These very, very mini drones, and that's what enables them to get into some of those tight spaces and even do some of those shots. The drones are actually very, very small, and now they're flying those mini quadcopters that are a little bit bigger, but they're holding more cinema grade type of cameras. And so that pilot's doing things like, whether it's race cars or, car commercials, a lot of high speed, when you think of like action sport kind of stuff, to get angles that have never been done before. And so it's cool to see where people are taking the technology.
I remember you showcasing a drone that was huge. Did you make that?
The big one?
Yeah.
So the bigger systems that we have are for heavy lifting capabilities. So most of the drones that people see now, even the common drone that we use on almost a daily basis is the Inspire 2. And it's not a huge drone, but it's still bigger than most consumer level drones. And so it's always funny to me when people are watching us operate and they come out and they're seeing that drone and going, wow, that thing's huge. And I'm like, no, it's really not. But because when you compare that to like the one that you're talking about that we like to show off, a hexacopter, octocopter with 8 arms, 6 arms, or 8 arms, those are much larger platforms. They could be 6 feet in diameter. Most people have never seen a system quite that large, and they're really specialty systems. They're designed really for the lift capability, and they're stable in the air, so they can handle wind speeds and things like that a lot more. You can mount a lot more technology to them, so there's more capable things, especially in the mapping, surveying, inspecting, the data-driven part of what drones are doing. You see larger systems so that they can stay in the air longer or carry several pieces of equipment. And most people are just used to seeing, small, compact, portable systems, mainly because they're used for video and photo use. And so they just need to be able to lift that one little camera and off you go. But there's a lot of things that you're going to see larger platforms be used for. So the deliveries that are potentially being tested with, those are not small systems. They have to be able to lift and fly, a relatively decent distance. And so that's where you need more motors, more power, bigger batteries. It's all kind of a balancing act with how long can you fly versus what are you carrying and things like that to get that sweet spot of actually making the drone a useful tool. I mean, we use ours for mainly those ones that you're talking about, because we have 2 of them, and there's one that we used that was a DJI system, and it's like their big version of what they offer. And that one we bought because it could carry a unique sensor that we wanted. And so it's still one of the coolest sensors, and we never really able to get any business with it. It was total bust. But other than police, we see police, and we were able to see telecom industry use it. And that's what we technically wanted to get into, was the cell towers and power line kind of transmission lines and those type of inspection work, because it can basically, it's got a 30 time optical zoom on it. And so for the drone world, that's like unheard of. And there's some cameras now that are out there that people have seen that can do some zoom, but not like the sensor that we have. You could be like, so from like right here to the top of that roof line, you'd probably be able to look at nuts and bolts on that roof line. It's insane. So we did a lot of testing and things like that, but a lot of it just became, it was too advanced for its time, I feel like. And so a lot of the stuff in the drone world, that's kind of one of the biggest challenges, is trying to have companies be able to, not only do they have their wants and desires on what they could do with the drone, but they have to be able to figure out how to integrate that data, or come up with a process where it's actually useful, gives them ROI and why we'd even do it. And that's where we do a lot of that back and forth with companies, is helping them get to that point to where they understand, and not only the process, but we need to know why they're doing it, what's important to them, what's the end result. Otherwise, why do it at all? And so that's kind of the big question for a lot of the companies. But going back to that sensor, there's, it was just too advanced in its time. People were amazed when they would see the end result. They just didn't know how they could make that, profitable or useful with their current workflows. So like SWAT teams use it though, because they could be over here, and you could take, like, say they were surveillancing, like if they needed to do a SWAT operation on a house, you could be blocks away and like watch the house, and they could take photos, and then, because then you can enhance them even further when you get it on your system. And so you would see now their workflow now is to have that sensor. And then the other reason that we have that big system is because you can actually dual sensor. So they'll have that zoom camera that hangs down on one, and then they have like a thermal camera on the other. And so now you're like fully, like when you think of eyes in the sky for like a government type of operation or military operation, you have thermal capability from the air. So it's like having that helicopter, right then and there out of the back of a car kind of a thing. So, and then they can have that zoom one to like look long range for, I know they were using it to like take images of like license plates and things like that from ways away, so they could help with the safety of the ground operation. But it was just ways for them to, like, I don't know, incognito style, ninja style, because you can't, it's weird to think about, but it goes back to that whole, when they were doing that, a lot of people just didn't want them communicating that was even possible, because when you think of public perception on privacy and those kind of things, like, it's all a balancing act on what's legal, what's not legal, who you're going to offend, who you're not, and what's it going to be used for. So it's just like anything else. Yeah. There's pros and cons.
I used to have a 360-degree lens back in the day, but nobody was interested in it. And it was so difficult to convince people that this was the future.
So we did the same thing when we were probably like our third year. We saw that was possible, and that there were some deliverables going out there that some companies were like just skyrocketing and becoming specialized in doing. It's kind of like Matterport, where it just kind of came out, and now it's like this, everyone knows what Matterport is in the real estate industry now, right? And so the 360 piece was something that's evolved over time, and a lot of people still don't know that. I've seen some companies in the region use it and take advantage of it. I know there was a tour done actually through Visit Tri-Cities, right, where I think on their homepage they have a 360 tour of some of like the Columbia Point area and some of these more tourist populated areas. I tried to pitch that to these companies years before last year, and so it's been out there for a long time. It's been capable for a long time, but it's just one of those things, maybe it's too advanced for the time period. They don't know how to use it. Like you were talking about your own personal experiences, where like sometimes people just don't get it. They don't see where the market's heading or what the possibilities would be with something like that. And so sometimes you hit or miss, but we've always been trying to stay like at the forefront of what the drone world is doing and what's financially feasible, with the equipment that we have, and offer clients like really unique products and services. And so not only, there's other things that we're totally possible of and capable of doing, but it's not necessarily something that we advertise. And that's often because most of the market's not quite ready there. But we always encourage people, that's why we like to have those conversations, is to learn what their end goal is, because sometimes there are solutions that we have and little tips and tricks or different things that we can do to achieve that outcome that we don't offer on the website. But that comes from the years of experience of just knowing what's possible, how you can do things. And we're always willing to have that conversation. But yeah, the 360 market is totally a cool thing. Because with Century, right? I'll go off on a little side tangent with you guys right now. You can probably cut right there. But the Matterport stuff, like I've always been interested in trying to do that 360 imagery from the air into the ground, because that's like the one thing. Have you seen the one I was talking about with Visit Tri-Cities? Yeah. So their 360 aerial that they had done, which I don't know who did that for them, is pretty basic, to tell you the truth. Like it's done really well. They did it, color and everything looks great. The feasibility is great. We actually do that for a company, People's Company. So you guys are like our commercial and residential team that we work with, and we work with People's Company, who's like the giant company of the like farm ag sales kind of thing. So they specialize in investing in farms, and then they either have their own investors like back those properties and they'll flip them later, or they just do standard, land sales, but they focus on the ag world where they try to find ground that's worth buku bucks and sell it. And so they've really skyrocketed their company, but on their prestigious properties is where they'll have Brian and I go. They're one of the companies that'll literally send us like anywhere in the country, and they will go like full crazy marketing. You can stop on oh, okay. Oh, but yeah, they will totally like dedicate tons of marketing resources. So we love working with them because they have that same feel when we work with you guys. Like they're always ahead of the game, and on when you look at them and their competition, it's like not even comparable with what they're doing on the marketing side, which is a reflection in the success and awards you see them constantly winning, just like Century. But 360 has been done on some of those properties because you can integrate many buyers from anywhere in the world versus trying to trust just whether it's standard photography or your more traditional basic kind of like element of marketing. When you think of like especially real estate sales, what else could be done to really engage buyers from anywhere in the world, because there's investors that are often looking from all over the place. We know that they, like for that other company, they'll have buyers from New York that are buying sight unseen on multi-million-dollar properties because they have everything they need at their fingertips to be able to make that investor type of purchase. And so when you do that and you think of that type of buyer, you really want to be able to help them make that decision. And drones can play a huge part in real estate as far as what's possible. But I think that's kind of the crazy thing with the 360 is like they could have. So one thing with that Visit Tri-Cities tour, so you can bring that aerial tour down into those businesses. So instead of just placing like markers on key locations in Tri-Cities, you could do this with any of those virtual tours. Like I think we talked to Vicky about it when we were first learning about it, and over the years we've got a better understanding of like what is fully possible. But often it really probably comes down to the time involved to do that level of quality on a project. And so I think the cost versus the time piece is probably not quite matched up, but I think in the future years, that's going to be another, like Matterport will evolve to where it's not only an indoor little virtual kind of walkthrough, it's going to be like a full experience walkthrough. So potentially even replacing the drone kind of like video or like video work in general, I could see it become more of like 360 click through, faster, easier rendering, and more informational. Because one of the things I noticed like with just like a standard home tour is, regardless of the quality, it doesn't have the context, so all you get is the visual. You get the visual and you might get the feel based on the music and how you flow it through the house and all that, but like you could really add informational pieces into more of that 360 Matterport type of tour. It just comes down to like workflows and who's working on it and how you do it. But you could have things like square footage. You could have, like when you're in the kitchen, you could have all the types of materials that you click on. You could potentially change colors, and there's full on like crazy things you can do. But the drone piece is where you have that, like the aerial piece to it is the new part, because you don't see a lot of people doing that. And it's very similar software that actually does it. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the program because I would tell you the name, because they have some pretty cool YouTube. They have all their stuff's on YouTube. As far as like their instruction and stuff, I think they're based out of Europe. So they really have like an international market. And so you have to like they try to teach and coach like based on like regardless of where you're at in the world and whatever your market is, like here's how you can do some of these basic things. The rest of it you got to figure out. So it's like kind of difficult to learn. That's the thing is like, but I think it's just like anything else. I mean, like if you ask Vicky what's going on in the real estate world, she's going to know what's happening 5 years from now. Right. And so when it comes to drones, like we've always been in that market too, whether it's just because we don't do it doesn't mean that I haven't already researched it or seen it, understand how it works, like any of that stuff. Cause that's before now, like I would say we did a lot more of that in the early years because we were trying to like understand which avenue we want to go down. So it was a lot of like not only us educating people, but we were constantly educating ourselves on like, okay, let's watch this company and this company because they just did this acquisition on this brand. Those guys were partners on this type of camera and they could have a product that is going to be like amazing, a year from now or 2 years from now. So those kind of things like we were always doing. But like what you're talking about for that tour, who's that? Oh, that tour thing it's been possible for, I'd say easily 5 years, like easily 5 years. And it's all there. But like I said, when it comes down to the market being ready for it, that's where it's at, because most people would look at that process and me just knowing like where you would go with it from the 360 element down into the interior, like whether you're integrating Matterport or doing another type of 360 imagery where you're combining all that together and then you're adding all those elements that I was talking about before, so that it's not just a new version of Matterport, that it's actually an enhanced, like you want to be the number one in the world kind of thing. You want to brand yourself like this. And there's probably companies that are out there obviously doing it because they wouldn't have a market. They wouldn't advertise that it was there if they didn't have clients that were using it. And so when you see some of their sample work, I would say, so like if I showed you the sample work of one of their videos on what you could do with the software that we use on like a full integration where you have air, ground, and interior, because you can do outside as well and ground, and then you can obviously bring it into like businesses or whatever, and you compare that to like what's on the Visit Tri-Cities website, you'd laugh, because that's how much like gap there is as far as like what you could have done to what was done. And honestly, there's several reasons why that could have happened. It could have been price. It could have been the people that did it could have been not as capable or knew how to integrate all of that together. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, it just could be server issues, speed issues, who the end user is going to be. Like if your clients, like the computing power, internet speeds, like to handle all that like type of file is pretty demanding. But if you have the right setup, that end user, like if it was custom built for a client that had fiber and everything else, like that end product is sweet. So, but I'll have to show you so you know what I'm talking about more. It's just crazy when you think of like a click-through tour, like completely immersive almost. And I didn't do it from the VR perspective, but you can do it from VR. That's just another option. It's just a toggle on and off. I like to do it just on desktop, big screens, and it's crazy.
No, I think that issue was.
But I think that's where the market's going. Is where I think in the future, like 10 years from now, I'm gonna like look back and be like, I knew it. I was right, Vicky. I knew it. Because I just think like constantly, like, how do you show off your product? It's always changing. Everything's changing. And it's like, well, what else can you do to sell a house? Like, what else can you do to sell a business or a piece of land? There's only so much you can do with what the technology is there. The creativity piece is like where everyone's always been competitively kind of going at it, but for me, it's going to be like, what's the new way to get that new experience or the new feel? A drone video is a drone video. One might be better than the other, but ultimately it's the same type of experience. You're seeing stuff from the air, you're flying around, a Matterport's a Matterport, different things like, but it's like, how do you get to where it's like, damn, how did they do that? Like that type of feel, that's where that experience I think comes in. But it's probably years away from the speed of being able to do it. The software's got to get probably more user friendly so that it's not so advanced, because if not, then it's like, who's gonna Like most real estate companies aren't going to have people that know how to do the full workflow or have ever worked with that type of stuff. And then Matterport, maybe Titan, and maybe they have something that's coming out that's more user-friendly based, like, so it's more turnkey like Matterport is. But I'd be surprised if it was, because to get that type of wow factor usually requires some like skill sets that are like, yeah, we can do that because, you know, Bethany's the one that knows how to do it all or whatever, you know, like it's got to be in that realm. But I think that's there. But I was just thinking of that, like when Vicky was talking about like how she talks about the team, and when you're asking her about like how she operates now versus when she was an agent and how that all tied together, and she realized she started putting this team and things to allow her to grow, and then it helped her agents grow. And it's like, I think that's the right model to think of, but it's going to be even more in depth down the line for the brokerages that continue to just rise. They're going to keep pushing that envelope.
And that's the end of this podcast. Thank you for tuning in and learning about drones and how they are a vital part of our industry. Stay tuned for another podcast by Century 21 Tri-Cities.